The Fallen by Krissa Curran.
Chapter 1. The Dreams Begin.
I shook myself awake, with a half-scream formulating in my mouth. I managed to gulp it down, beads of sweat trickling down my temples, and all along my flushed, red cheeks. What time is it?
I glanced at the clock, and it was only 4:30 in the morning. With a grumble, still muttering to myself, I kicked back covers over my socked feet, and pulled the rest of it over my head. The last thing I remember was the faint ticking of the clock as it turned 4:31. I mumbled something about another stupid bad dream again, then settled into a more normal dream about frozen yogurt and oversized koalas.
The following morning, I'm awoken up by Chester's insanely loud squawking on the porch below my window. Chester's the squirrel I have named because of his all-too-frequent visits to my woodland home. And yes, squawking is the most appropriate term to describe his uncharacteristic method of communication. When I first heard the strange noise coming in through my window a few months ago, I honestly thought a duck had somehow gotten very lost and ended up at 820 Boca Raton Road, where I live. You can imagine my confusion when I peeked my head out the window, still frazzled and grumpy with lack of sleep, to find instead a large red squirrel staring back at me before scampering away into the state park, which makes up my slightly oversized backyard.
Today is no different. I've come to anticipate nature's wake-up call before I hit the snooze button on my alarm clock for the 5th time. Just 5 more minutes, please. I can feel my face stuck to the pillow and I refuse to budge. I take a moment to collect my thoughts, to prepare myself for a fresh and bright new day. I can already hear my mom's overly enthusiastic caffeine-pumped bugle call. There is a nice and cool September breeze blowing through the window, carrying with it the smell of morning dew and the breakfast, pancakes and bacon. Mom would already be preparing in the kitchen directly below me. I glance at the weatherman on my clock's screen display just to make sure there's not a chance of rain today, the first day back as a senior. Mild and sunny. Good. The time reads 7:21 a.m. Not good. Why can't I ever be on time? I hurry to change and make my way down for breakfast. Breakfast was the same scenario as always. Except today, Mom had set the table out for us on the veranda, trying to make the most of good weather, of course. Other than that, Dad resumed his place on my right, Mom in front of me, leaving the Douglas firs and western hemlocks on my immediate left. It was a round table, very diplomatic. The only head of the house here is Jessie, Dad once joked. Right, little madam? She is. Jess was the black Labrador I had received for my 9th birthday. That made her 8 years old. Human years, of course.
True to nature. As Jess paraded up and down the terrace, Dad was busy scrutinizing his weekly delivery of the Guardian newspaper from England. Old habits die hard, he argued, trying to convince Mum it was worthy, necessary investment for a year-long subscription. When she disagreed, he secretly got my uncle Stuart in London to send us copies every week instead. Uncle Stu was a high-rolling banker, a businessman, unlike Dad, who simply got his company's courier service to mail us Dad's weekly requests for free. Every now and again, he put the paper down, intermittently scribbling something into his notepad, another noteworthy idea for the thesis he was currently working on for his second PhD. Something about irony, lying, and the theory of sacrifice. Sounds kind of pessimistic to me, I always said.
Dad was a professor at Portland State University. He taught English 301, Shakespeare, as well as English 341 to 345, which covered everything from the Renaissance to modern British literature, his passion, apart from the outdoors. He met Mum after completing his degree at Cambridge University and heading as far away from England as possible without fully leaving all his home comforts behind.
According to Dad, Portland, Oregon was just like London, but better. Not so dreary and wet all the time. You'll see one day, he said, when you go off to university. It was true, though. I never really understood the connection, apart from the fact that Portland was named Beervana for its heavy distillery industry, and how the English do love to drink. I had my fair taste of that summer when Dad flew me back to visit the family, and I fell in love with the banana-flavored white beer.
See, Dad had said, you'd never get to do that back in Lake Oswego now, would you? He was referring, of course, to the fact that in England, you're legal to drink at the age of 18. 17, 18, pretty much the same to me. Not that Dad was encouraging underage drinking, of course. He just thought it was about time I experienced proper pub culture. Portland doesn't even come close.
Dad was always pushing me to get out of the States and explore the world as soon as I turned 18. He thought I was foolish for not wanting to leave home, for being so dead set on spending my entire life in our little city of Lake Oswego. My beloved Lake Oswego. I couldn't imagine a better place to live. Although, in reality, I really was excited to go. I mean, it's London. Apart from one little factor, how could I not want to go? I knew my dad was right. How could I pass out on a chance to live in London after King's College had already given me an unconditional offer? That's what you get when you have a respected professor as your dad in the field. Although, in my defense, we both knew I worked my butt off to get my 2008 SAT scores, plus extra credits to rightfully win my place there. He wouldn't have gone off my tail otherwise.
Mom was a bit more apprehensive. I knew she hated the thought of me going so far away. She hated being in the house alone. Even with Dad there, he was often so wrapped up in his dissertation that I knew just how she felt. I could tell it was putting a slight strain on their relationship. Mom was already so busy setting up and running her own business in downtown Portland that to have Dad so absent as well meant they were spending less and less time with each other. A shame, really. Like I said, they met after Dad finished his degree and hightailed it out of London. He knew somebody in Portland who got him his post at Portland State. He met Mom just as she was finishing her degree there, and then 5 years later, they had me.
I couldn't imagine a more ill-fated couple. Dad was a nature-loving English academic, and Mum was a first-generation American city girl with a quick temper. And yet, somehow, they made it work all these years. They were quite cute, really. I suppose they weren't an uncommon sight in the coastal valley region.
I had my mother's big, brown, almond-shaped eyes, her smaller frame, and the olive skin tone characteristic of kids like me. I loved it. It meant I could actually get a tan, unlike the bright pink sunburn my English cousins always complained about. My hair, though, was a lighter brown, like my dad's, with natural caramel highlights. And in all other aspects, I was pretty much exactly like him, except a bit too liberal and a bit too laid back. Mom's words, not mine. Anyway, that would explain me being late this morning. Right, honey, I'm off.
I hadn't even realized breakfast had finished early when Mum was busying herself pouring the remains of her coffee into a portable Starbucks flask and packing her micro laptop into her micro handbag. She had her Crackberry already plugged into her ear as she kissed my dad and me goodbye. I could hear the hasty crackling of a client's voice down the other end of the line. Something about placing another last-minute order, which would explain Mum's sudden haste to catch the next 35 express bus into town.